Alright, so welcome back. In this video, what we're going to do is we're going to now start our project of creating a simple screen capture program to actually get to know a little bit more about C# and Visual Studio. So in this video, we're going to be using Visual Studio 2019, and this is how it looks after you install it and when you're starting your first project. So what I'm expecting that you already have Visual Studio 2019 installed. 2017 will still work, and even 2013 will still work. However, we'll be using the .NET framework of 4.0, so it's better that you use Visual Studio 2019. There are some advancements in there, even though we're not using it, just so you're up to date. But if you're not, it's still fine. Now, we're going to be doing this in Windows Forms. There's other ways we could do this, but we're going to use Windows Forms because this is almost like a beginner's video. And I don't want to get into the weeds of XAML or WPF or anything like that right now. So we're just going to focus on getting the project done, and then later on we can refactor it, and so that way it works with XAML and Windows WPF applications or universal Windows apps. So let's get started. So I'm going to go ahead and click on create a new project, and I want to go ahead and make sure that this is a Windows Forms project. So I'm going to select up here. If I don't see it over here, I'm going to type in form, and what you're going to see is a Windows Forms app right here. We're not using VB in this one. We're going to be using C#. So I can go here to the language, I can put in C#, and then I'll get all the C# templates right here. And the Windows Forms app is the one that I'm looking for right here. So I click on that and I click on next. And once I do that, I can go ahead and put my project name here, and we'll call this window capture or something like that. In fact, we just call it screen grabber. Make sure you save it in a place that you can remember, and then all this stuff is fine. Go ahead and click create. So we've seen screen captures before. If you go to your Windows, if you're in Windows and you type snipping inside of the search, you'll see the snipping tool right here. And this comes with Windows. You click on new and you can actually select an area that you want to capture. So see how it captures that image there. And basically, that's what we're going to create. We're going to create our own version of this. Maybe not look so good, but it's also going to help us learn a little bit more about C# and Visual Studio. What would help us is if we were to take a quick look at the development process here, and I just kind of put this together here. So here's where we're going to be starting in our development pipeline. We first start off with the UI. Now, some people start off differently. Some people start off with the logic. You could start off with the logic. But the UI gives you a sense of what the user will be doing, exactly how you want it to look, and the interactions that the coders are going to want to know about before they even start developing anything. And if you're the coder, then you can either start one way or the other. But the UI sometimes is a good way to start because you can sketch it out. You can do it in PowerPoint, and then everyone knows that we're, you know, what you're thinking, and everyone's on the same page. So here we have the UI structure that starts first, and then we have our logic that we outline how the logic's going to look. And then from there, as you can see here, this development, this test, TDD stands for test driven development. We actually start testing some concepts out before we even start developing. So that way when we develop, we know what we can and we cannot use. If you already know this, then it's possible that whoever you're working with won't be using test-driven development, but it's always good to understand that this is a major component to the way applications are made today. And then we start developing, and the whole time we're developing, we're also testing simultaneously. Then we do something called refactoring, and that's basically restructuring our code so it's cleaner, it's more robust, and it's readable. So we do all that here, and once we're done with that, we go ahead and deploy. Now obviously this is not an exhausting structure or exhausting chart, but it's something that we'll be able to use to be able to do most of our projects actually when it comes to developing the UI, development of the code, and also refactoring and deploying. Something as simple as what we're going to do here. So let's take a quick look at the UI. So this is basically how the UI is going to look. We're going to have our form back there, and we're going to have a screen grabber button like this. And maybe even if I don't have this and you wanted to go ahead and do your form, basically you don't have to have it look like a Windows form. You can basically just go here, find a shape, add a shape here, and then I'm going to add another shape, and I'm going to change the background to this one so they don't look the same. Then add another shape, put it here, and put grab. So now I have my user interface, nothing fancy. Oops. Grab there. Nothing fancy. Everyone knows what's going on. And if you wanted to, you can even put a picture back here by selecting the shape, right-clicking, going to fill, and then go to picture. And then you can browse and look for a picture online if you want. And maybe something like this, or even something like this, I guess. And there we have it. I have this Windows form there, even though mine won't look like this, but it gives you an idea. So now we have our user interface and the picture will show up here. So now let's look at how we would do our logic. So I'm going to start this new. And this is a good idea for you to do this as well. So first you have your user interface. Now we're going to focus on our logic, and we're basically going to be using shapes again. I always want to start off here at the very top, putting that this is the application start. And I'm going to change the color of that by selecting it, and I can go here and I can change just what the text says to make it red. Or if I wanted to change the whole thing, I can right click on this and go to fill and change all that to whatever color I want. Now I'm going to ask a question here. So I'm going to go down here to my flowcharts and I'm going to go to this diamond. This diamond means ask a question. So the question I have is btn grab, because that's what I'm going to name the button, dot click. And I'm going to put that as a question mark because I'm asking if the btn grab click was pressed. If it was pressed, then what I'm going to do is I'm going to first select the screen region. Then after that, I am going to grab the current and instead of saying grab, I'm going to say capture. And then after that, I'm going to display. So now that I have all this here, all I need to do is show the flow of all of this by adding the arrows. So I'm going to go here to shapes. I'm going to use this shape over here. It's a arrow, but it's bent. And all I got to do is connect it till they connect to those little control points on each one. And after this happens, I can just go right back from here back to the question, because it's just a button click and it's waiting. It's waiting for the next button click. So there's our flowchart. There's our logic. At this point, we're pretty much ready to go. So let's go ahead and now start coding. All right, so we already should have our project open up from the previous time we had it open. And we should just have a blank screen here. And you should be somewhat familiar now with Visual Studio. So let's just go over it really quick. Over here are all our tools that we'll be using. You don't have to go over every tool, but any tool you need for interface is going to be over here. And over here, if you don't see it, let's say if this wasn't here, the tools weren't here, then you can easily go to View, and then you scroll down to Toolbox, and you can pop it up here and then make sure it's pinned and readjust it to whatever size you want. So we're going to be using that. Here's our Solutions Explorer, and here's where all the files and the forms to our project will exist. So just imagine this if it was like a website. This is just where all the files would go. Down here are your properties, so whatever's selected, everything has a property, and this just tells you what those properties are. Right now we can see the form 1 is selected, And form 1 actually derives from systems, Windows forms.forms. Don't worry about that right now, but that's just where it comes from. And these are all the properties to it. And let me give you an example. And you should fool around with this. This back color here, as you can see, it's the same here. If I were to go down here and change this back color, you can see that it changes that color there. Now, that's basically all we need to know right now. Aside from the output, you see we have this output button right here, or tab. And that output is going to represent the output that we print out when we actually go to the log. Or if we go over here to the errors list, this is where all the errors will pop up when there is an error in our code. All right, so based on our user interface, we're supposed to have a button. So I'm going to go over here to the toolbox. I'm going to select this button, and I'm just going to drag the button down here. And the first thing I want to do whenever I add anything to my scene, I want to go ahead and name it. So I'm going to go over here, make sure the button is selected. I can tell it's selected because it has all these dots around it, these control points, just like it did in PowerPoint. Same thing here. I'm going to go over here to the right, and I'm going to scroll down. This text is not the name I'm looking for. This text represents the text that the viewer sees. We're looking for the name of the button that we'll be using in code. And under Windows Forms, that's called the name. So we can scroll down until you see the name, which you'll see it right here under design, and it says name there. We don't want this called button 1. We want it called grab or something like that. However, we don't want it just looking like this. Let's say if I just call this grab. The reason why we don't want it this way, even though it's clear what it is, that it's named grab, but it's not clear exactly what kind of object it is. You know, it must grab something. We have no idea. It could be a label, it could be an image. And in order to be able to tell what this is, especially in code, we have to use what's called camel casing, and we want to actually put something in front of the word that lets us know that this is a button. So when other coders are coding it, they know that this is a button. And one way we can do that is just typing btn for button, and then grab will start off with a uppercase. So this is camel casing. btn always starts off with the lowercase. So if this was a label, it'll be LBL, right? So btn stands for button, LBL stands for label, img might stand for image. It just has to really be something that your team and you all agree that that's what it means. So that way when you're in code, it actually makes sense. And they know exactly what kind of object it actually is. So now after that, I want to go ahead and name this button. Make sure the button's selected. Now I'm going to go to, I'm sorry, not name. I want to change the label of this button. So I'm just going to put, now this is just for the user. So it just says grab. You can change the color. What you want to do is fool around with the attributes of this. So once I select it, as you can see, the attributes here are a little bit different. I can change the back color to this, to anything I want. The attributes are available to me. Let's say, for instance, I wanted to change the font color, the font itself. So I'm going to click on these three buttons right here. I can go to bold. I can actually change the the size of it, and you'll start seeing that you can actually do a whole bunch here, including changing the image. I can go ahead and change the back color, the image to this. You want to go ahead and fool around with that so you kind of get used to it, you know, used to dealing in this interface environment, this complete environment to developing anything you want to develop. And you can make it look whichever way you want, but it's always important to fool around with this sort of stuff so you can kind of get used to it. So one thing you should recognize here is at the top, this top tab up here has a star next to it. That means it's not saved. So what you can do is you can go over here and you can click on Save All. And as you can see now, that star is gone. You could have hit also Control S to save it. Now over here on the right, you're going to see your form. And if you click on a little arrow down there, you'll see the designer, and that's going to bring you to the code behind here. And this is where everything actually takes place. However, we don't want to go ahead and start coding right away. We want to allow the system to code it for us. So there's a couple of ways we can do this. We want to be able to access code that happens when this button is clicked. Now, I could go select this button and go over here to this events, and I can find the click event and double click in there. And what you're going to see is going to open up form.cs. And it's going to write the name of the button, which was btn grab, and it's going to give it _ click. And anything I put inside of here is where everything's going to happen whenever I select the button, or whenever the user selects the button. If I go back to the design, sorry, not the designer, but design view, I could have also done that by double clicking on the button, and it would have written the exact same thing here. So you see there's two different ways of creating an event for a button. You can select a button, go over here to the events, and then find the click event and double click in there. And this is why you want to make sure that your button is named first and saved. Because if you go back here, I'm using these tabs up here, you don't want this named in the wrong way, and then you got to go rename it, and it's just a big hassle. So it's always important, it's imperative that whenever you add an object, you name it first, and then you can go ahead and relabel it, and then you go ahead and go to the code behind. Almost similar to what we did when we were in the PowerPoint. We talked about the user interface right first, and then we started talking about all the other elements that we may need. And it was this process that we showed here. User interface, the logic, we already did the logic, and then we developed. So we're kind of doing that same thing inside of the code itself. So now that I have this over here, now I want to go ahead and test. And I'm going to test by displaying something in the console window. So I'm going to type console.writeLine, and I'm going to write hello world just as a test, and I'm going to go ahead and put a semicolon there to lock that off, and I don't have any errors. I'm going to hit save because I can see it needs saving. Now I'm going to go over here and hit start to run it. Now I won't see anything in my interface. The button will work, but I won't see anything in my interface because we're spitting that out to the console window. So I'm going to go ahead and click grab, and as you can see down here in the output, you want to make sure you're in the output tab here. In the output, you see that it worked. That's our first test. Our test worked. Now we know our button is connected and it also works. So I'm going to go up here and hit stop, and now we're actually ready to code. So instead of you watching me every second typing it out, I'm going to type it out, pause video, I'm going to type it out, and then I'll come back and explain. Alright, so inside of my button grab, I'm going by the logic that we set forth inside of our application, our logic sheet here. So I'm first selecting the screen region. As you can see here, I'm taking the primary screen. So I go ahead and I create this variable here called rect. That's the variable name. And then here is the class that it's pulling from. If you type the class out called rectangle, what you will see is that it will turn green, and then you go ahead and give it the name. So this is the type of object it is, and this is the name of it. And what I'm doing here is I'm taking the screen, which is a keyword here called screen, and I put dot primary screen, and I want the bounds to that. Meaning I'm taking the boundary of the screen, and I'm putting it into this rect variable, and that rect variable is a rectangle. Okay. All of this right here is coming from this system drawing right here. So let's say if I took out this system drawing using here, what you'll see is I'm getting all these errors. If you see these errors, even though if you type it right, it just means you're not using the right libraries so the system knows what this stuff is. So I would have to go back here and put back in the using systems.drawing. And so that's where I'm doing all this. Now, what I do then, after I capture the screen, I take that and I want to take the rectangle's width, which is this, and the rectangle's height. And this is here's the comma here because I'm separating these two parameters because this bitmap right here, class, takes two parameters. It takes a width and a height. It goes inside of this function, and what it brings back is it brings me a bitmap, which is the image. And this special keyword here simply means I want to start a brand new one of these, and we'll get into more detail of this. This is actually called a constructor, but for right now, let's just focus on what it's doing. Let's not talk too much tech talk right now, okay? So We just want to know the flow of things. So right here, I'm taking this, I'm creating a brand new class bitmap, and bitmap takes a width and it takes a height. And we happen to just be taking the width and the height of the rectangle we just took, which means whatever size the monitor is, that's the width and the height that we just took. We're putting it into bitmap, and it's going to give us a brand new bitmap, which we're putting into this this variable right here, which happens to be of a type bitmap. Okay. Next, what we do is we go ahead and we want to take that image, and we're going to take that image, convert it into a graphic, and we're putting it into G. Now, we take G and we copy it from the screen's position, 0, 0, 0, 0, with the rectangle size, and then we're going to take that and we're going to put it part of this background image. And as we showed you before, when I go here to the form, I'm going to select this form right here. And you can see this form has a property called background image. Let me see if I can find that. I just passed it. Right here, we have background change. We have background image change. I'm sorry, we're in the events, and this happens a lot. But we do have these events for the background. However, we want to go back to the properties here. And then we can go ahead and search for the background image, which is here. And there's nothing in there right now. But when we finish, we're going to take this, meaning this means wherever this code is. And this code happens to be in this class here called forms, right? So it's the form1 class. So when you use this word this in C#, it just means this form. So I could literally say form1.background image, but this is the best way to do it. And then I'm taking that parameter or that attribute of this, which is form1, and I'm adding what I just captured in there. So we should see this work. Now, what you're also going to see in your code behind is this public form1 initialize component. This happens. Whatever's in here, first of all, you got to have this because this is going to initialize all the visual components of your application. So anything you type up in here should be after this. This part right here happens right when the application starts without you doing anything. For instance, I'm going to put here, I'm going to put a comment. So I'll do testing init of application, testing the initialization of the application. I'm going to put console.write ready to grab. Now we should see this come up inside of console window just as we did the first test that we did, and then when we grab the button we should see it fill the background with the image. So I'm gonna go ahead and hit play, start. And first of all, this right here, as you can see down here, the ready to grab is there. Let me go back to the application. And we click on that and you can see it puts the background there. So we have our screen grab, and I can keep on dragging this out. You see it grab the entire screen. There's a ton of things that we have to fix right now. First of all, it's actually going beyond the barriers of my form. So there's a lot of things that we have to fix. It's actually grabbing the button. As you can see, it's grabbing the application screen here. So there's a few, that's something we have to fix. So we should be able to remove that because really we didn't want to grab the screen with the application there. So that's something we would have to fix. And maybe we want to move this button to the size of the window as we're stretching it out. So there's a lot of things we have to fix, and we want to put that part of our notes so our team can go ahead and do that. So what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to put those in notes inside of your application. And the way you do that is the same way you would do it like this with this comment right here, except that you're going to do it in another way. First of all, we have to stop the application, and then we're going to go here and do a comment here, and we're going to put to do. Now, the reason why to do is a special kind of comment because Visual Studio understands what to do means. It adds the to do comments in a special task list. So let's say I said to do, remove this when done. Let's say if I go down here and I'm going to add another to do here. Now, I put the to do all in capitals, and I'm going to say refactor later. You can put whatever you want here. I'm just putting some notes here so you can see how the to-do works. And you can even say, put someone's name here. So you can say to-do, and I'll say something like John or whoever, Smith or whatever. You can have a certain way where you do your to-do so that the person knows who needs to do it. And if you're just your own person, your own team, you don't have to put someone's name there. You can just put what you want to do later on. You know, like maybe over here, I can add a to-do that says hide application window on capture. Okay. Now, the reason why these to-dos are pretty special is because I can go down here to the task list tab, and if you don't see that, you can go to view. And then you can go to the task list here. But it should be down here, right next to the output. So I'm going to hit the task list tab. And as you can see, all these to-dos are there. And it tells you what line they're on. And the cool thing about this is, if you have a lot of code, you can just double click on that and it'll send you right to that to-do. So that's why these particular comments are extremely important. These comments are important as well, but these actually help you in production, and it helps you actually work faster, and it actually helps you get back to work faster when you come back to your code. So hopefully this was helpful. If you have any comments, make sure you leave them in the comment section below. Also, watch the next video because we're going to refactor this and we're going to fix those issues that we're having with this one later on. I'll see you guys next time. All right, bye.